Thanks very much. I'm the last Vietnam veteran serving in the United States Senate. I remember full well our withdrawal from Vietnam. I remember watching on television as American helicopters rose from the ground in Saigon, and attached to them all over those helicopters were Vietnamese people trying to get out of that country. I remember watching those helicopters rise into the sky and people fall off of those helicopters to their death. And as I watched our withdrawal and the effort to try to get 125,000 people out of Afghanistan a month or so ago, I was reminded of what happened in Vietnam, I think in 1974. I think from the time that Donald Trump, and I'm not a real political guy, as my colleagues know. I think from the moment he sat down with the Taliban and began a negotiation, cut our two presidents to 2,500 people, I think the die was well cast. I think the pitch was pretty well telegraphed. And I said to myself, this may not end well. And it didn't. I think the question for us now is, what do we do now? What do we do now? We're out of Afghanistan. We're trying to make sure that about 125,000 other people who are Afghans who helped us, that they have a chance to get out of there and to be resettled here. And I think our challenge is how do we handle the resettlement? How do we handle that? And that is, Mr. Secretary, that is a big part of your job, helped by Delaware and Jack Markell, our former governor, to make it go well. And I think one of the questions for me today is, what do we need to be doing, not just in this committee, not just in the Senate, but what do we need to be doing as a body writ large to help make sure that the folks that are coming here have a new chance in their lives, have a chance to get settled. A lot of them want to work. We have a lot of employers that are looking for workers, and maybe at the end of the day that something good, hopefully, can come to something very tragic. I stood on the tarmac with the president, our military leadership, my congressional delegation, about a month ago as we received the sacred remains of 12 of our heroes, Navy, Air Force, rather Navy, Marines, Army. And it was a sad and hard day. What do we do now going forward? There's a lot to do. We need to work together to make sure that we learn from what's happened in the past, learn what's happened in the last 20-some years, and go forward. And with that having been said, I want to ask my first question, if I could, to Mr. Wray, Director Wray. In 2020, the FBI arrested 180 individuals on domestic terrorism-related matters. Of these arrests, 75 were identified as white supremacist extremists. For years now, we've been hearing about the rising threat of racially motivated attacks, specifically attacks carried out by white supremacists. And you may have heard me say before that in order to address the problem, we must understand and address the root causes of that problem. Director Wray and Secretary Mayorkas, why have we seen such a rise in racially and ethnically motivated extremism and violence in this country in recent years, and what is the root cause and how are we tackling it? Mr. Secretary.
Senator Carper, let me, if I may, take a moment to answer a point you made or respond to a point you made. There's important legislation that is pending that would bestow upon individuals evacuated from Afghanistan the same benefits that refugees receive, and that would assist in their resettlement here in the United States and their integration into our communities. And we're extraordinarily proud and inspired by the unity that we see across the country. We have seen, regrettably, over the last several years, Senator, a rise in the manifestation of hate. We've seen the propagation of false narratives. We've seen an increase in anti-government sentiments, and we are very watchful of and vigilant in response to any signs of connectivity between those ideologies and acts of violence. That is where our focus is.
All right, thank you. Director Wray, please, same question. Root cause, what is it? What are we doing about it?
So I think our focus is, of course, on the violence, not on the ideology itself. I would say that one of the things that we've done about now 2 years ago is create a domestic terrorism hate crimes fusion cell, which was designed to bring together both our domestic terrorism experts as well as our hate crimes experts and try to get ahead of the threat and be more proactive in going against the threat. And we're very proud, for example, of the work of that fusion cell in preventing an attempted attack on a synagogue outside of Las Vegas, for example. I will say that a big part of the threat that you're asking about is the social media dimension. You know, some of these same people before might have been stewing away in, you know, the basement or the attic, one part of the country, and not communicating with each other. But today, terrorism moves at the speed of social media, and you have the ability of lone actors disgruntled in one part of the country to spin up similar like-minded individuals in other parts of the country and urge them into action or inspire them into action. I think that is a huge part of the threat that you're asking about.
All right. Thank you. Another question, if I could, with respect to Afghanistan and counterterrorism. This would be for all three witnesses, and I'd like to start, if I could, with Director Abi Zaid, please. Question: as we grapple with the fall of the government of Afghanistan, our focus remains on how to get Americans and our at-risk allies to safety. However, as we know, and as I believe you've mentioned in your testimony, ma'am, terrorist organizations thrive when they can exploit instability and weak government institutions. And that said, it's important that we look ahead to our ever-changing landscape in that region following the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. To that end, I'd like to ask each of you to take a moment to address the following. How has our threat landscape changed since the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan just 3 weeks ago? And how are your agencies working to address the shifting threat landscape that will undoubtedly continue to evolve? Follow-up. I have a follow-up, but let me just, that's the one I'd like for you to tackle, please, if you would.
I'd ask each of you to try to be relatively brief. There will be a second round of questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. The threat from Afghanistan, I think, is the top of our priority in terms of understanding what that dynamic landscape is likely to produce in terms of an external threat. We do think that principally the operating groups, ISIS-K and al-Qaeda, present a significant threat in the region. They are going to have to contend with the new de facto government in Afghanistan, the Taliban, principally ISIS-K. And this will be an absolute top priority as we develop our intelligence capabilities, our over-the-horizon capabilities, to make sure that we're monitoring any changes in the threat landscape and able to arm policymakers to address that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I'm just going to ask that there are other two witnesses respond for the record to that same question. Thanks very much. And it's good to see you all. Thank you very much for being here, for your service, and for your leadership with the men and women with whom you serve. Thank you.
And I'll note, in addition to the response for the record, I'm sure others will be asking you a similar question, and you can elaborate on Senator Carper's question. Then Senator Johnson.